Check, 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 check.
Hey, how you doing, Bill? Good to see you, sir.
Check, check, check. Check, 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 check. Check. Check, 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 check. Check. Check, check, check. Check. Check, check. 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 Check, check, check. Check, check. Check.
So, Rob, we're not going to have an official timing. Oh, the 3-minute clock? Yeah. Okay. Well, I think, well. Hey, Bill. Good to see you.
You lucked out.
Check, check. Testing.
Okay, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order here. We'll start with the pledge, please.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can we have a roll call, please?
Director Gibson,
Here.
Director Ohilsky,
Here.
Director Garfinkel, and Director Zimmer.
Here. Okay, with that, we'll go into board member comments. Before we go into that, I'd like to make just a qualifier here. I have a doctor's appointment this afternoon that I'm trying to reschedule because my doctor had to cancel it because he was sick. So if they do call me, I may have to step out for just a few minutes. So I'm not planning on leaving the meeting, but I may have to step out for a minute or two. So with that, we'll go to board member comments. I don't know if anybody has comments. I do, but I'll go last. So.
I got nothing.
Yeah, I have a couple comments just to provide an update on some of the progress. I think, the feedback that we're getting from the community is, what's being done now. We have a lot of discussion going on. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of update from Golden State Water's perspective of some of the projects we have going on. We have two key projects that are taking place right now. And the first one is bringing ion exchange treatment to one of our plant site facilities. We've entered into a contract, and that equipment's actually being manufactured off-site right now. In addition, while we're going through the permitting process, so we're kind of trying to hurry this along as quickly as possible. And that project's a huge benefit. Gives us a lot of flexibility for utilizing our existing blending plant that we have in operation right now. So, in addition to the blending operation, we'll be able to actually treat nitrates and operate an upper aquifer well more than we currently are right now. So huge progress taking place there. And then in addition to that, we just signed a contract for drilling a new well at our Los Olivos easterly of one of our, it's not our far east section of our basin, but more in the easterly direction than, say, Rosina plant site and places like that. So we're going to take some of the pumping off of the westerly wells that we have and ship. So we do have that contract in place. We're going to begin drilling actually in about 2 weeks, and hopefully the drilling will be done by May, and then we'll move in with equipping that well. So huge projects taking place for the community and for the basin plan. These items are listed as objectives in the basin plan. So just wanted to provide an update on that.
Am I on? Now I'm on. Okay. Yes, I have a couple of comments or maybe suggestions. It's my understanding that, well, first of all, we all know that we're going to need grants in order to accomplish the basin plan. And it's my understanding that at this point, we as a body are just a committee from a court committee. We have no other legal standing. We're not a public committee. But in order for us to get grants, and we probably have more experts around here, I think Carolyn might have information on that, I think we need to be a public committee. So I'm asking that we, on the very near future, on one of our agendas, we bring up the subject of forming a JPA, because that would give us the legal status that we need in order to go after especially Prop 1 grants and other state grants. And then the other thing that I want to mention is also for grants, it would behoove us to join the Regional Water Management Committee, the earworm, and so I'd like that also to be brought up on one of our meetings soon to sign the memorandum of understanding which allows us to join that.
So, no, those are both very, very good points. All those points were good. I just wanted to do one quick update, and I think this one's been out in the press enough now. It's our chromium issue in our one on our 3rd Street well, which obviously got a lot of publicity, and that was because the state changed their standard for the actionable level on the chromium, and then when we did the testing, that well was shut down immediately as soon as we got those results, and that well has not been restarted at this point, is my understanding. But I want to assure everybody that the deliveries that were made to all of our users were below the level because our water is blended, just because the way it's circulated through the pipe system. So we did not exceed that level to any of our delivery to our customers. So now I have the Basin Management Committee thing that I'd like to bring up. We still need to deal with our budget, and we're not in a position to approve a budget yet. My board has some comments that they'd like to make to the budget. What we really need to do is we need to, I think, refine the budget. And the primary issue that we have, well, we have a few primary issues, but one of the issues that I think we need to resolve just internally is how we're dealing with the in-kind services. So if the county's providing the administrative and taking the minutes, how are we accounting for that in our budgeting? Are they being allowed to deduct that from the amount of money that they owe to the budget, or how do we deal with that? And I know the district had agreed to provide some administrative services. We also have the issue about legal counsel. Are we going to be represented by 5 legal counsels and everybody gets billed for those legal counsels, or do we want to go ahead and set up an RFP or an RFQ to hire our own legal counsel? So those are the kind of issues I think we need to get pinned down so we can come back next meeting with a detailed budget so we can move forward into the future here. So, and I know the budget we have is conceptual at this point, and I appreciate Rob's work on that. But because of the drought and the unfortunate side effect of everybody cutting back their consumption, it cuts back the amount of income that we have available in the district as far as to help fund these kind of things. So we do need to do some fine tuning. So I've already talked to Rob about that, and that's something him and I will be working on. So if anybody else wants to get input to Rob or me in the short term, I think that would be helpful. The other issue is because everybody has a different quote-unquote fiscal year, it's tough for us to be able to budget because the budget that we've been presented for this committee is on a calendar year basis and we're on a fiscal year basis. So if we're talking about the district being responsible for $119,000, I need to be able to budget that in two fiscal years. So I need to know what portion of that is going to occur between now and June and what portion is going to occur between July and the end of the year, so I can accommodate that in my budget. So I just want to lay that out as there's something Rob and I have already talked about, but input that we can get from the rest of the committee and the purveyors so we can just make sure we can come forward with a budget that works for everybody next time. And so I think that's where we are on that. So any other comments? Okay. Seeing none, we have the consent agenda, which is basically the minutes from our January 5th meeting. Does anybody have any comments on those?
You opening it to the public?
Well, or pardon me, questions. Anybody have any questions? Okay, do we have any public comment on the minutes? Step up to the microphone,
We got
please.
a mic this time.
Yes.
My name is Keith Weimer, member of the Sustainability Group, Sierra Club. Just a couple of comments. I noticed a few of my comments were not accurately represented. My comment for items not on the agenda was actually the opposite of what I said. I was stressing the need for conservation, and I was stressing the need to keep that $5 million in place to support conservation. That's the $5 million the county is supposed to spend for the wastewater project program. And in response to Jeff Edwards, I made the point that a conservation program that relies on a retrofit to build program is counterproductive because it ultimately results in greater water use. Okay. So I wanted to clarify that. My comments regarding the need for more detailed minutes also applied to BMC members. I was hoping that The detailed minutes would also apply to the comments you make, because I thought the intent was to get some of that back and forth, but the minutes are still focused on just action items in terms of the, the committee members there. This reinforces the need for a videotape meeting. It's only $2,000 more, and that should come out of the contingency plan if necessary. Thank you.
Thank you. This is for comments on the minutes only. Go ahead,
Linda
Linda.
Tornotsky, Los Osos. I believe Karen Venditti's name, her last name
Was
is
misspelled,
misspelled.
yes.
Could you fix that? Thanks.
Yes, I picked that up too.
Richard Margetson. On 7A, my comment reads, Richard Margetson suggested the committee post flyers on the intersection of Palisades and Los Osos Valley Road. That's not what I said we should do it, the corner down here. I said we should use the A-frames that are available to post the meeting dates and use the sign. So I'd like that corrected. And then under open public comment, I guess, Rob, you're the one taking these? Or are you doing? Oh, okay. This I know I didn't say, because anybody who knows me knows I would never say this, but Richard Margetson commented that the acre feet involved in conservation does not have anything to do with seawater intrusion. That doesn't even make sense. The second part about pressuring the county to go back to the Coastal Commission about the 140 acre feet going to dryland farmers is correct, but the first part of that comment is, I don't expect you to get it word for word, but that's absolutely not what I said.
Okay, thank you. Any other further public comment? Seeing none, we'll close public comment. So can we have a motion?
Move
on the
approval of consent.
With corrections?
Corrections, we'll leave it to the clerk to reword as necessary.
Is there a second? Oh.
I'll second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please? Or any discussion? Okay.
Director Gibson and then Director Zimmer.
Correct. I would like just to clarify that, you will be taking those comments and
Yes,
then
we'll
going back and
we'll
making sure.
correct those comments as discussed. Okay. Okay, Director Gibson,
Yes.
Director Ohilsky,
Yes.
Director Garfinkel,
Abstain, I wasn't present.
okay, and Director Zimmer.
Yes.
Okay, so with that, Rob, then we'll move to item number 6, which is the Executive Director's Report.
Great, thank you, Mr.
And I'd like
Chair.
to thank you ahead of time for your detail in response to the comments from the previous meeting.
Yes, certainly. I wanted to spend a few minutes today just highlighting for everybody here that we did have an opportunity to walk through some of the questions that the Sierra Club had posed and try to come up with some very straightforward responses to the extent that we had comments to make, and thank the Sierra Club for their questions, and I think it'll be a good dialogue going forward. A number of these things really go to the annual report process in terms of contingency planning and what to do if seawater intrusion is continuing, metrics and so forth. I thought it would be worth just commenting on a few of our responses, just so if folks have not read the document, they would maybe be intrigued to read it. One of the questions was, what happens if the infrastructure programs don't stop seawater intrusion? And I won't sit here and read all my responses, but a few lines I think are germane. We talked about the judgment that requires the parties to evaluate the effectiveness of the plan periodically and implement additional measures to mitigate intrusion. Things like mandatory reductions in pumping, similar to what the CSD did in its water shortage contingency plan, and that every year during the annual report process, we really need to be talking about the effectiveness of the plan to date, where we sit on metrics, and what sort of contingency plans need to be put in place for the scenarios, the plausible scenarios that might be coming at us. So a lot of the focus in this document was on the fact that, yes, we have a safe yield determination in the judgment, but we also have the reality of physical conditions out here and the requirement to respond to those actual conditions. So I think going forward, we're going to have especially for this first annual report, a robust process of fleshing these things out and putting them on paper when it comes to contingency planning, actions, and those sorts of measures. So I would encourage everybody to take the time necessary to read through these responses, and for committee members, if there's any additional detail that you want to talk about today as part of this agenda item, I'd be happy to go through any individual questions that you may have. But I think this will be helpful for us going forward. We did have a few notes in the director's report about the county's growth management ordinance process that goes to the Board of Supervisors on May 17th, where they're really looking to take the list of allocations that were previously developed and give additional time on that list. And so we noted that if the committee wants to participate in that. We also are evaluating perhaps going to Member Garfinkel's comments about grants. We have 3 strong proposals from prospective grant consultants, all of which have good experience in the various propositions in IRWM process. So we're evaluating those, and we'll be bringing back a recommendation at our next meeting. And we also gave an update jointly written with the county on the zone of benefit process that we talked about at our last meeting, finalizing that request for proposals and getting that on the street. And so that's an update to my executive director's report. I also want to note that as far as the posting of the meetings, I still think we can do better on our posting. Notice that there was a sign out in front that maybe had an incorrect time. We didn't post that sign, but I think it is good for future meetings to continue to expand our posting. This time we had it on both websites at the CSD office, but I think you'll see that posting expand over time as we get our sea legs here. So wanted to note that. And that these meetings, thanks to AGP, are being recorded, and we have good audio. We don't have to yell this time, and that will continue. And we are posting the audio on the website. If you go to slowcountywater.org, click in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see our committee's name on that, and then you can get the audio for the meeting. So we have a good record. And I did provide the committee with pricing for video services as well, if you're interested. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Committee Member Gibson.
Thank you, sir. Just to confirm on the zone of benefit proposal, you expect to have the RFP finalized out, get responses, and recommend a consultant to us by the March meeting?
That's what we're shooting for.
Okay, excellent. And how are we doing on the matter of notification? How are we doing on developing an email notification list or other
improved
sign up?
We have a list mail service that I know many of you were on it, but we'll make sure all the committee members are on it.
Good. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other questions before we go to public comment?
I just have a comment regarding the video taping and how we post that. The fact that the numbers that were mentioned in public comment are quite a bit different than what were printed in the report. So those numbers are quite a bit higher than that. And the fact that, as you mentioned, the audio, we did have a member of our staff go back and review the audio just for clarity and see if they were able to make out what was taking place, and they thought it was impressive. So the fact that cost is higher and that the quality of the recording is good, that I think in addition to that, the fact that we're not putting up a lot of PowerPoint presentations or anything like that, the visual aspect of it, I think all confirms the fact that we're doing a good job with the recording and getting the information out to the public that aren't able to attend the meeting. So I just want to make that. And then as far as the feedback on the questions from the Sierra Club, you did a remarkable job on answering those questions and the depth of them. And I just wonder if that's going to be the intent moving forward, is that we're going to go through and not go through and answer those type of questions with that type of depth, because a lot of the questions that were there were really in the basin management. You just extracted them and elaborated on them. So, and it's not that we want to hide something from the public. It's more the drain on resources, the time and effort that I thought that you must have put into answering those questions was probably extensive. And is that something that the committee is going to be doing moving forward? And like I said, it's not to hide anything or not to get the information out there. I just wanted to know how we were going to move forward with that. So pretty much those are my comments on it.
Thank you. Yeah, Mr. Chair, if I might. First on the video service, I think folks in the public were referring to the increment of cost above the audio recording, because the audio features and so forth do have a cost which is in our budget, and so the over and above cost would probably be in the annual cost of $2,000 to $3,000, something like that, when you take the $400 we're paying and add the additional dollars. On response to questions, on that particular item, it felt like we had pretty good consensus that we wanted to prepare written responses. Most of the time, I hope to answer questions as we go. The nature of those, I think, were reflective enough that it was worth spending what came out to be, an hour or two at a time. And if you see a written list of questions, and I'll try to indicate, hey, we might want to consider written responses to these, give the committee a chance to think about that. But I think that from time to time, it's not really common for us to get a lot of written questions, but from time to time I'd be coming to the committee and saying these might be worth tackling in a more formal way.
Thank you.
I'd just like to comment. I think we should be encouraging people to do written comments. It really is so different, and when you do a written comment, you're not you're talking off the cuff, but typically those written comments that we get will have a lot more substance in them, and they may answer questions that other people have who aren't at the meeting. So I would really encourage anybody who wants to give input to the Basin Management Committee to do that as a written inquiry, and then if we get enough of those, perhaps we can make that even a special section on the website of comments or responses to written inquiries. Because again, I think they are much more substantive than just oral comments done here at the meeting.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, I think submission of written comments is a good idea. It certainly gets to the heart of things. As to your response, Mr. Executive Director, I know that you have a very full plate, and so I would think that the direction from this committee would be to respond when a question is relevant and when a written response from you can add something to the discussion. And I think we'll, as we go along, see that on a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Yeah, a couple of comments, Rob, and I do have a question for you before I get into, well, I'm not doing comments, but I do have a question for you. You talked about in here in a number of places about preparation of the annual report. And I was just wondering if off the top of your head, or if we need to do this next time, if you could explain to the public what's going to be included into that annual report, because I've had that question asked to me multiple times, what's your reporting process? And I say the annual report. So can you maybe give us an overview now, or do you want to defer that, or how do you want to deal with that?
That item is on our agenda under a later item that was for Cleith's presentation. Right. So for their section, maybe on the technical side, I'll punt to that. But so there'll be lots of figures, charts, right, similar to what you've seen in the past, but expanded.
I was talking more about how do we address some of the issues. I understand the technical aspects of it.
Right, but for the first annual report for us, I think we'll have a lot of difficult questions to address that are foundational.
Right, exactly.
And I think that the committee will consider those in their meetings over the next 4 meetings between now and June, when we hope to complete the 2015 annual report, and we'll bring those as they come with staff reports and recommendations. For instance, things like contingency planning, how we deal with our metrics. So there's some important policy level questions.
That's what I was going to say. So philosophical and or policy questions, we'll have more of those in this initial annual report, but once we get things up and going, then we'll just basically be updating the prior year report. But I wanted to make that clear to the public. This first annual report was going to have a lot of background information and policy information in it. So because we're trying to get everybody up to speed, not just us, but the public too, as to what's going on, because with the ISJ process, obviously that's not something that they've been involved in. The other question, and we do need to discuss this in context of the budget, though, is the video versus the audio issue. And I think that, it's not on our agenda for discussion today. You came back with a figure that was a lot less, quite frankly, than I anticipated. So I think, I appreciate the comment that we're not showing PowerPoint, so the audio may not be worth it. The other side of that coin is that how do we best communicate to the community? So that's something that we'll talk about next meeting when we finalize the budget. So I just wanted to bring that up, though.
Okay, great.
Is there anything else that anybody wanted to? Okay, seeing no other questions, we can go up into public comment.
My name is Keith Weimer. I'm the chair of the Water Committee of the local chapter of the Sierra Club, and also a member of the Sustainability Group. And first, I want to thank the Executive Director and the Basin Management Committee for providing these answers to these questions, and for what is obviously a serious effort to understand the concerns and to address them. We really appreciate it, and it was a great job. We are encouraged to see several points of agreement relative to our recommendations that we've submitted in the past, and as we further develop our position. I said last month that the LOSG and the Sierra Club may provide a basic position this month that we would support for funding, and I asked for a block of time, but we're not prepared to do that. Instead, we'll be submitting a few more questions and responses to these answers in an effort to better understand and exactly how the parties will be implementing the stipulated judgment and the basin plan. We hope that by the time the annual report is released, we'll have all our concerns addressed and we can support funding wholeheartedly, no reservation. Here are some key points of agreement. Thank you for clarifying and agreeing that the objective of the basin plan is to limit production to no more than 80% of the basin's sustainable yield, and we agree that recommended program options are designed to do that. We are glad to hear that you believe time is of the essence in implementing both the basin plan conservation and recycling programs. We appreciate that you will be providing an estimate of current and historical basin freshwater storage capacity and preparing and periodically modifying contingency plans for the annual report. Members of the groups, I'll leave that till the end. A few points of continuing concern that we hope will be resolved. We are still concerned that the purveyor entitlement pool will allow you to exceed the 80% yield metric, and that modeling pumping below the sustainable yield will be used to approve new building before there is physical evidence seawater intrusion is reversed. Supervisor Gibson has said that building can occur based on modeling. What mechanism or policy will you have in place to avoid that? I'm going to need just a few, maybe 20 seconds to finish up. We're still concerned that you are not committed to implementing a comprehensive indoor-outdoor conservation program or improving the recycled water program as soon as possible. We are still concerned that uncertainties have not been explicitly addressed that can be factored into the basin objective, sustainable yield, and contingency planning in a manner that ensures basin sustainability. Finally, we are also concerned that the basin plan remains heavy on reports and studies and consultant work and light on real commitment to reversing seawater intrusion, at least at this point, we can't achieve a sustainable basin on paper. We are optimistic that all of our concerns can be worked out, and we are willing to serve on ad hoc committees or in other ways to help you in that process. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lou Tornotsky. I'm a member of long-standing of the Sierra Club, going back 20 or 30 years. I don't participate in the local chapter for many reasons of substance and tone, which is illustrated by the questions that are raised in the report from Rob. I would urge that we identify that these comments are from the Sierra Club, whatever the name of the chapter is. So it's basically Mr. Weimer's Sierra Club, not mine. And let's name the chapter. And I'll try to talk to people up in San Francisco about the history of this interesting interaction over the years. Thank you.
I can answer that question. I am Patrick McGibney. I'm on the executive board of the Santa Lucia chapter of the Sierra Club and also a member of the sustainability group of Los Osos. I've talked to Chairman Ohilsky about my time right now. Instead of coming up and having 3 minutes for several different issues, I'm going to just take a few extra minutes if I need to on presenting this. Looking at the audience here, it can be seen that we really need more public participation. It's nice that we have audio, but there's a lot of our community that is elderly. They don't go on the computer. They do watch television. So the few extra dollars for video would really be helpful to get the public involved in this. I will also answer one of the questions dealing with the 16 questions that we presented from the Sierra Club. Components of the wastewater project addressing recycled water use in the Los Osos groundwater basin are stated in Condition 88 of the CDP, and I quote, "In order to maintain existing levels of groundwater recharge and protect coastal water quality, the county shall assist property owners in the implementation of opportunities to reuse existing septic tank systems. Prior to the connection of individual properties, the county shall evaluate and provide site-specific recommendations on how to connect such a system." End of quote. Condition 5B of the CDP states, the water conservation program required by the county project shall include provisions for the use of $5 million committed by the parties to initiate water conservation measures pursuant to the basin plan as soon as possible following approval of the CDP, which was years ago. The permittee, which is the county, shall coordinate with the water purveyors to the maximum extent to integrate this conservation program with purveyor-implemented outdoor water use reduction measures. End of quote. Has this been done? Have outdoor water reduction measures been implemented as required? Regardless of whether the county believes that indoor measures are the only conservation measures needed, it is clear that the CDP states otherwise. Who among you here believe that maximizing conservation measures is no longer needed to save the basin? These measures, I would assume, would include repurposing septic systems. In one of the 16 questions we submitted to the Water Board, which is where it went first, and then Supervisor Gibson of the county said he would answer the questions, and then he's passed it on to the purveyors, which Rob did an excellent job answering. So it wasn't just that we gave them all to you. This went to the Water Board originally.
Excuse me. Based on our conversation before, you're not going to get up multiple times, so if I give you a couple extra minutes now.
Thank you.
Okay.
One of the questions, question 6, was in regard to outdoor water use. The answer we received back was the scope and approach to the basin-wide outdoor program will be pursued as part of the allocated budget and may be included in future community funding efforts. The county received a conservation grant under Prop 84 for $3.8 million. This money was to be used for water conservation measures. Only $1.4 million have been used. We should have plenty of money for the budget. We just need to apply it, and soon. We hear that hookups will start next month. Once septic tanks have been filled with sand and gravel, we've lost them to repurposing. Repurposing these will help save the basin. Not only will it reduce outdoor water use, any overflow will help recharge the basin. But we may have a problem. In the recent emails between the county departments, it was discovered that much, if not all, of this conservation money has been transferred to construction administration. And I'll just read just a few of the little emails that I got here. Hi, Wendy. So it looks like we have $3,437,900 in water conservation implementation and $2,507,544 in construction administration. So do we want to move even $2 million from water conservation to construction administration? Regards, Ray. We propose to transfer $2.67 million from water conservation implementation to construction administration. With this transfer, the proposed grant allocations are water conservation implementation, $767,900, in construction administration, $5,177.54. Regards, Ray. Please move $2,670,000 out of conservation bucket. If that amount is moved, $4,000 will remain in the bucket. Regards, Ken Cardoza. This committee must ask the county if there is still enough Prop 84 grant money to maximize conservation. We need to answer the important question Daniel Robinson of the Coastal Commission has asked. Have you received anything from the county, and I'm quoting this, anything from the county in terms of why they believe they are allowed to transfer $5 million, conservation dollars, to other things? The community will need to know that the county and this board is serious about conservation and saving the basin before they approve any budget. Thank you. And I have some emails I'm going to hand out to all of you.
Good afternoon, Lindy Owen. I'm just going to run by some simple, sometimes simplicity is the way we need to really begin our complex process here. I want to talk about the top priority is no more growth. It's that simple. I don't care if Golden State wants more hookups. I don't care if the CSD wants more hookups. We have no water to give to anybody new, and this needs to get serious. Paper water is what has got Napomo in trouble, and it's what's got us in trouble to some degree. We knew back in 1970 that we had a seawater intrusion problem beginning, and we did nothing. Zero. So if you want to sit and have meetings and drag this thing on for 2 years, all you're doing is damaging our basin further. And I urge you to take some steps beyond the no new growth, not one more drop of water to anybody new right now. The conservation needs to be reinstated and restored. Recycled water is available right now from the upper aquifer. It's beginning to flow.
Lindy, this is for comments on his report. Seems like this would be more appropriate when we have general public comments at the end of the meeting.
Did his report talk about recycled water? No. Okay, I'm sorry. I've been gone for a week and a half. I didn't get to see stuff.
So, if you want to come back up here during general public comment, that's fine.
Okay, I will. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Tall people. My name is Karen Venditti, and I did have a quick question, Rob, about the report when you were talking about the annual reports and how things can be modified given the new information that comes up in an annual report. One of the things that I'm deeply concerned about is where all that information comes from that supports the annual report. In particular, currently there is not mandatory monitoring across the board for ag and private wells. And I really feel like this is an extremely important facet for us to better understand how we're doing and what those annual reports will show that we need to change. Thank you.
Lynette Tornatsky, Los Osos. Just a brief comment on Rob's part of the report about doing video. I seem to hear people always saying that, oh, well, if you just had it on TV. Well, if you don't have charter cable, you won't have it on TV because it doesn't play with no cable and it doesn't play with the dish. So you might check to see how many people actually have charter cable.
Richard Margetson. I want to thank Patrick for his comments. We keep repeatedly getting accused by our supervisor of not having facts when we come to the microphone. What would those emails be considered? But that's not why I came up to give public comment. I want to, first of all, clarify, if Rob would clarify, is the difference between the audio and the taping $200-300, something like that? And if it amounts to the $2,000-3,000 that you're talking about, and it ends up being an issue for your budget, I will state right now that I can probably, with some help from the members of the audience, make a donation to the committee to make sure that those happen. So if it's only that incremental amount, we should have a talk, because I think the community would chip in to have those recorded. Now, I appreciate your comment, Mark. I want to give you a reason why these meetings need to be taped that you will probably remember. You remember a number of years ago when the water contracts came for the schools? How did we find out about that? Board of Supervisors had a meeting that morning. Remember where we were that night? Remember how, I won't use the word, off you were to show up that night with no notice. The notice came because it was televised. That's how our CSD found out about those contracts coming forward. And an item that was supposed to be on the school board agenda, that was supposed to be a slam dunk 15-minute presentation, ended up, because of public comment at supervisors meeting that morning by myself, you finding out about it, our CSD manager finding out about it that afternoon, ended up being more than an hour, almost an hour and a half discussion at the school board meeting, and all the bigwigs showed up that night from the county. It was supposed to be a slam dunk, almost consent type item. Mr. Gibson, Mr. Diodati, Mr. Waddell, and Pablo Ogren came to a school board meeting about those contracts. That's why these need to be. That's why the community needs to see these. And if the incremental difference is that small, we can make up that difference. But for you personally, if you remember how you felt back then, that's why these should be taped. Because that was inappropriate, how that was handled, and how that was crammed down this community's throat just to get a condition of the coastal development permit passed.
Seeing no other public comment, we'll close public comment. We'll bring it back to you if you have any responses.
Just very brief. First on Ms. Vendetti's comments, well taken. I think that will be a future discussion. I noted in my executive director's report that for the first time since the mid-'70s, our production as a purveyor group was down around 1,000 acre-feet, putting it in an approximate par with the ag and private pumpers, about half of the basin production. So amazingly low numbers in 2015. Hats off to the community there. And then the difference in the video cost, yes, around $200 to $300 a month, assuming one meeting a month.
Okay, so do you have any other comments? Otherwise, we can have a motion to receive and file with direction to staff. Any other comments?
I do have comments. One of our public commenters, I think, pretty seriously mischaracterized the nature of the Prop 84 grant to the wastewater project, characterizing it as a conservation grant, and it was actually a grant for general eligible eligible expenses, which covered a wide range of things, including, to some extent, administration. And you're sort of conflating that with the $5 million condition for water conservation, which is part of that $5 million listed in the approved budget, part of that $5 million yet to be raised as revenue. So, in fact, there was not a specific grant to the wastewater project for water conservation. It was all part of the main budget deal. So, with that, I will move that we receive and file the report.
Is there a second? Moved by Gibson, second by Garfield. Any further discussion?
So I just wanted to clarify, are we going to change the executive report? Because it says $500 to $600 in the report.
That's an accurate number. That's the total cost. It's when you compare it to the approved budget, which was...
Right, but it doesn't say that. It doesn't say that it's compared in addition to the video. It just says that that's going to cost $500 to $600. So we'll be taking off our existing cost?
Right. I'd be happy to make that clarification. I think that'd be smart.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Can I take a vote, please?
Director Gibson?
Yes.
Director Ohilsky?
Yes.
Director Garfinkel?
Yes.
Director Zimmer?
Yes.
Okay. With that, then, we'll move to our action items. First one is 7A, review and approve proposal for hydrogeologic services.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This one may yield an interesting discussion relative to time and approval or lack thereof of our budget, since there's some time-sensitive items here. We'll see how we proceed here, but let me just give you an overview. The technical aspects of the annual report that we are hoping to prepare include a compilation of all of the data that is available for 2015, and that would include the analysis of seawater intrusion front and the figures that are associated with it, a look at the groundwater available in storage over time, groundwater contours that depict water levels. Really, it would be an annual snapshot of the state of the basin, and it will compile both the work that's unique to this and also the county's monitoring and everything else that's being done in the basin. It's kind of a one-stop shop for what is the state of the basin. So to me, it's going to be a very helpful document because a lot of this information is in different sources and disparate documents right now. So we think that's going to be an immediate benefit to the community. There are also some initial costs to fill some of the gaps in monitoring that are contemplated in the basin plan that are covered in the proposal from Cleith Harris, and those costs were also included in the budget that we had previously talked about at the committee. And finally, there are some of the costs associated with the semi-annual seawater intrusion monitoring that we're now accustomed to seeing because we've done this 3 times and hope to do it this April again. Those costs have now been consolidated into this budget item because a lot of the charts and the graphs, other than the raw data, would now be incorporated into the annual report. We'll release the raw data as we get it, but then the more complete charts and analysis will be in the annual report. So all of that is lumped into this item, which proposes a cost of $56,000 to accomplish all of this work. So Cleith prepared 2 proposals that are included here in your package, and the total amount that was proposed is a little bit above the budget that I had estimated several weeks ago in previous meetings, but we do believe that the $5,000 overage can be covered in the contingency that we proposed. Initially, Cleith had looked at a 3 to 4 months schedule to accomplish this work. However, in order to get to a point where we're ready to release an annual report that matches the schedule contemplated in the judgment, which is 6 months from the beginning of the year, putting us at the end of June, We've asked them if they can accelerate their timeline, and they've indicated they can. They'll need to push hard, but they'll be able to accomplish that work in more of a 60-day time frame, which would be in better lockstep with the committee's deliberations over the policy questions that surround the annual report. So a lot of work needs to be done, and the timeline is fairly short in getting this out in June. So perhaps this is something, if the committee is willing to provisionally approve this and then go back to your respective decision-making bodies for the district. Perhaps it's at the first meeting in March. For the county, you can report on your status of approving the overall budget, whether you have a process you need to go back for, and then the other committee members perhaps can comment also on their process. But we're hoping within a matter of a few weeks to get Cleith rolling on this work so that we can meet that deadline, if that's possible. So that completes my report.
You raised a good question that I probably should have brought up earlier. Can we just get a head count from you guys where you guys stand in the budgetary process as far as approving the budget for the committee? I mean, I stated where we were, but could we just get feedback from Golden State, Sunset, and where you guys are?
We're prepared to move forward with the budget as far as it stands.
It comes before our board next week.
Okay. It's approved. Okay. So half approved and half pending.
Well, if I might, Mr. Chairman, a question. Who's the counterparty to the contract with Cleith Harris?
Generally, we've been running that through Brownstein Hyatt as the holder of that contract, and then they parcel out the costs to the individual committee members.
Okay. And so I guess the question of timing, when does the work need to start for them to meet the April deadlines and things like that?
I think in the first week in March, we'd want to have that started.
So we have budget approved sufficient to cover can we go ahead and move to get this contract, assuming that we're going to get appropriate contributions from the CSD? We have budget allocated from the county and from Golden State that should cover this.
I think that it would certainly get us rolling if we want to go that direction. All those dollars will not get spent in the next 3 weeks. Right. So that would certainly cover.
You're good for the money, right? Well, when? Well, no, not how much. That's been carefully crafted, right?
Well, we want to get some refinement in the budget.
Yeah, we're on a reimbursement basis on the county's allocation.
We're going to be on the same footing. It's just how we budget it after our.
So all of that was to say is that we can reasonably act on approving this moving forward, to have Brownstein Hyatt go ahead and sign this contract while we work out the budget details.
Yeah, and I think we have a window here where we have a CSD meeting coming up quickly, and if this is going to happen, I think we can make it happen in that short window.
I think it's our meeting's 2 weeks from.
Two weeks away, yeah.
I have a question here. As you mentioned, there's a lot of compiling of data that's all around in separate pockets right now. Can we say that the next time around, because this is going to be obviously annual, that the cost should be going down?
I think it's an excellent question. In fact, there are a lot of costs that have been assigned to year one, and I do think it will be less effort and less cost in future years. Certainly less policy questions, but also the template will be done. And we've experienced this in some of the other areas around that have adjudicated basins. The year one cost is the bigger hit. So yes, I think the answer is yes.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll go to public comment.
My name is Keith Weimer again, and just a few brief comments. I would just hope that in everybody's individual budget processes, you're looking at the potential for there to be some reduction in cost due to duplication. So, and Rob, I'm sure you're assuring us that there's no duplication here with other things. And okay. I just wanted to point out that I wanted to ask, actually, whether this is going to, whether the other things CLEAT does is going to include the added monitoring, the gaps that the basin plan talked about, whether those gaps would be filled, and whether we have enough funding in the basin plan, in the budget to take care of those gaps right up front, so we can, we'll have all that in place for this report and also the seawater intrusion report. Again, if you would like to form an ad hoc committee, perhaps to deal with contingency planning, we'd be interested. And I just point out that your bullet 4 probably should include that the public input as well as the BMC input with regard to, the final report. Thank you.
Lou Tornatsky. I concur that this is essential for all the things we're going to be doing for the next several years. Because what this amounts to is a very sophisticated, complete approach to measuring dependent variables as we tune the system and make improvements, make changes. So this has got to go forward. I do share the concern, and just for information purposes, how much is this going to cost in year 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7? Because once you start measuring these things, you need to measure these as you go forward for a long time.
Any other public comments? Seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to Rob.
Yeah, just briefly on Mr. Weimer's question. There's no funding in this plan for drilling new monitoring wells, and there is one key monitoring well in Cuesta by the Sea that we'd love to fill that gap. In fact, in a future meeting, I think we'll have some collaboration with county staff. I know that from time to time there's monitoring well money at the county level that perhaps we can all participate in. But I think that is something that's worth bringing up at a future meeting. Is that gap's always been contemplated as something that we fill after we get full funding, but we might want to consider bringing that forward, at least in the most critical screened interval, since there's a big assumption in that area.
Okay, thank you. So we'll bring it back for discussion.
I agree that establishing that extra monitoring well should be high priority. We can always amend the scope of work to monitor that well too, if we get there, as soon as we get there. And I'm prepared to move staff's recommendation unless colleagues have questions.
I guess the only qualifier is that we do have to make sure that the final budgets get approved by both of our bodies. But like you said, there is adequate funding available to get this started. So we have a motion. Do we have a second?
No, I just wanted to make a comment that we'd support moving forward. Make a motion to authorize Rob to move forward.
Second.
All right, we'll change the motion. We'll have it started there and seconded here. Okay, any other further discussion? So we can take a roll call, please.
Director Gibson?
Yes.
Director Ohilsky?
Yes.
Director Garfinkel?
Yes.
Director Zimmer?
Yes.
Okay, with that then we'll move to 7B, which is the recommendation proposed basin boundary modification request for the Los Osos groundwater basin. And I know we have a guest here.
Yeah, we do, and I'd like to have Carolyn come up and help me with, you can feel free to, might be more comfortable. It's Carolyn Berg with the County Public Works Department, serving in their Water Resources Division.
I was going to let you make that introduction, yes.
And very up to speed on basin boundary modification issues.
Okay. Hi. As mentioned, I'm Carolyn Berg. And so I'll just start off giving a really brief overview of what's occurred since the last time we spoke about this with the BMC, and kind of the proposed approach moving forward, and then go ahead and just open it up to you for discussion. So in December, your BMC took action to ask that the county move forward with seeking a potential boundary modification, looking at the science needed to support such an adjustment, and then looking at more closely aligning that with the plan area boundary versus what the state has defined as a basin boundary. So since that time, on January 5th, the county board, like it says in the staff report, the county board did take action to have staff explore a boundary modification and conduct the public processes necessary. All the rest of the details are really provided here, but we did have a public workshop to discuss the draft technical memorandum that Cleith Harris put together, and we're able to take some public comment at that time. And then since then, we had a public comment window on that draft technical memorandum that was open through February. And as far as I understand, we haven't received any public comment other than clarifications and questions, but no real comments except for some from DWR staff, just some initial feedback as they were reviewing the tech memo. So there were two items that we wanted to call the BMC's attention to. And the first was just to remind you, as we've talked about in the past, that when the state is considering the basin boundary modifications throughout the state, it's their responsibility and to their discretion to decide what basins and sub-basin boundaries are modified and whether or not certain requests might create new sub-basins. So that was something just to call your attention to, since they had pointed out that that could be a potential outcome of a boundary modification request. And then the other item is just, once we were able to pull together the scientific data that would be necessary if we sought after a certain modification approach, there are slight differences from the final court order plan area. And so what we were proposing to do is seek the boundary modification request through the state, supported by the inventory of all the science and the data that Cleith Harris put together, but ask that DWR consider that boundary request within the context of the adjudication. So essentially looking at aligning small areas to the plan area to improve the sustainable management of the basin. Hopefully that makes sense, but I'll open it up for your questions.
Thank you. I have one quick question. In the revised boundaries here, or pardon me, the boundaries, I guess a question. In the plan area, we're showing it as whole parcels. So parcels in or out. Now we're subdividing parcels, or splitting parcels. So how does that work?
So this is different from the plan area in that the state is looking for how are groundwater basins defined, typically by geology and hydrogeology. So what we had been working with Cleith Harris on is defining that basis, the scientific basis there. And you're right, the plan area is parcel-based, kind of the management side of the groundwater basin that your agencies had looked at through the basin management plan development. So this wouldn't be parcel-based, and then when you move into management through either the basin management plan or SIGMA if needed, then you would have to determine how parcels are brought in for, say, a zone of benefit, if a partial parcel is included. Does that make sense?
I mean, no, that's the same discussion we had with the Paso Basin, Bruce and I are on LAFCO. I just wanted to clarify because there are some tweaks, for lack of a better term, but that's the major difference that I see is going from a specific line to a parcel-based. So that's something that will have to be addressed down the road as we move forward with funding sources, et cetera. So I just wanted to clarify that.
Great.
Any other questions before we go to public comment? Okay.
Can I make
yes,
one more comment? Sorry, just in case anyone...
You have the floor here.
Okay, thanks. I would just note two other things that, we have sent notices out to the affected agencies and systems, public water systems, which essentially is comprised of your agencies. So we'll be looking for support or opposition to the boundary from those different entities. And then on March 8th, our County Board of Supervisors and Flood Control District Board of Supervisors will consider whether or not to pursue this proposed boundary modification. So it's our final step is to go back and seek their approval to formally initiate the boundary modification, since this was all part of exploring a potential boundary modification.
Let me follow up another question then. So if, assuming that the board and the flood control approves this, would you be looking for support letters from the various agencies, or what's the next step as far as us and then our agencies or our entities?
Yeah, so we've gotten word out to the staff at the different entities to try to work to meet your different board dates for consideration. So hopefully that would be considered over the next 2 to 3 weeks. Prior to the March 8th would be preferable so that the county board has that information. But that information can come in after a formal request is submitted to the state. So theoretically, those support or opposition could come in through the end of March at the state's deadline, March 31st. And then once a formal request is made, then the State Department of Water Resources will review the packet for whether or not it's complete, the request package. And if it's deemed complete, they'll open their own 30-day public comment period where, again, your agencies would have another opportunity to support or oppose or provide comments.
But your preference would be to have these up front when the submittal's made.
Yeah, I think it's more helpful, and I think it would help the county board, I would imagine, in their deliberation of whether or not to formally initiate.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Sorry, yes.
Carolyn, you're going to send out, if I understood you from a conversation before, a sample of what that letter needs to look like, and whom does it go to?
It can come directly to our staff, and we can include it. Any comments that we received will be included with our overall request package, including letters of support. So you can submit it directly to Kathy and I. And since I have already produced a similar letter or resolution of support from our flood control district board, I could provide that to anyone who's interested.
All right, so we'll go to public comment on this item.
Lou Tornatsky. I want to see this project done because it has implications for all sorts of things. It has implications of how the state and relevant entities and organizations see us. I think it also has implications if this drags on the determination of the boundaries that what the state thinks or what we want and so on. This could delay a whole bunch of things, like going after soft money to take sort of the pressure out of the people who live here, grants. So we all think it's going to happen quick, but I don't know, what's the range of possibility of how long this is going to take and be decided by those people who are the deciders, and then we can go forward with what we all think is the sane approach. That gives you enough to hang yourself a little bit.
Is that okay to answer directly?
Wait till the end.
Okay.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment. You can respond to that question.
Okay, that's a good question. I should have clarified earlier. So the process for approval, the state is on an emergency regulation time frame. So they're required, they'll be taking, DWR staff will be taking draft recommendations on the boundary modifications throughout the state to the California Water Commission this summer. And then they'll have their required comment period. So there's a 30-day comment period. Then they'll present it to the California Water Commission. And the California Water Commission has certain periods of time that they have to adhere to from the regulations with the overall intent of meeting the deadline that these boundaries be revised and adopted by the end of 2016. And then once they go through that boundary modification finalization, then they'll move into reprioritizing the basins throughout the state, and that would happen in early 2017. But as far as boundaries, those would be known at the latest by the end of this year, if not sooner. But I know DWR is pushing hard to try to move these along quicker, knowing that a lot of other efforts are reliant on this decision.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so any other discussion? We have a recommended motion here to support these boundaries with a letter to DWR.
So moved.
Second it.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, then we'll go ahead and call.
Yes.
Director Ohilsky.
Yes.
Director Garfinkel.
Yes.
And Director Zimmer.
Okay, that motion passed unanimously. With that, then we'll go to the last item on our action items. Thank you. Appreciate it. Item 7C, which is an administrative draft of a Los Osos Creek discharge policy, for lack of a better term. So, Rob?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a staff presentation and report for which we're requesting no specific action today because this will be the first time the public has seen it. In fact, we released it in the administrative draft form without recommendations so that we could get the technical information out and have everybody understand it before we formulate what staff's position will be and then bring that back for a subsequent action. I did want to spend just a few minutes talking about the technical aspects and trying to bring it to a point where a layperson could understand because there's a lot of technical detail in the report. And so I'd like to start with just a little bit of history. The idea of discharging water into Los Osos Creek to provide a benefit to the groundwater basin has been around for a number of years. It actually was a part of the original wastewater project in the 80s, and it's had a number of different iterations and studies over time. The current understanding of a creek discharge would be that if we can avoid taking recycled water and using it for areas that are currently dry farmed or don't have extractions from the basin and divert that to the creek, there could be a water supply benefit by increasing the yield in the groundwater basin in proportion to how much you put there. We're essentially talking about discharging water to the south of Los Osos Valley Road and some of the upper reaches of Los Osos Creek that are highly permeable and can receive a whole lot more water in the summertime than what the wastewater project is designed to put out. And so those are the areas that we're talking about. When you get into the regulatory environment, a simple idea like put the water in the ground so that you have it later becomes a lot more complicated, highly complicated. And so I wanted to start with just a few concepts that is important that everybody understands. The first is the regulation of these types of projects can go in one of two paths, and it's critical that it's understood. The first path is we're putting the water in the creek as a method of discharging it as part of a wastewater project. And there could be some benefits to the groundwater basin as part of that, but that's not the core purpose of the project. That's the discharge method of managing this water resource. The other method is a groundwater recharge and replenishment project that is from the get-go designed to be that and advertised as that. Those two paths, even though they may have the exact same physical characteristics of a discharge, are regulated completely differently under Title 22. And this report acknowledges those differences. If the project is regulated as a normal discharge, the Los Osos wastewater project will produce sufficient quality of water from day one to do that without further modification. And in that case, we simply are looking for a pipeline and an outfall into the creek and the associated management of that in order to pull that off, a fairly simple project. If we're categorized as the groundwater replenishment project, there are additional quality requirements that have to be met in order to be acceptable to the State Water Board. A couple of key terms of art. One is the issue of travel time. That's the amount of time water spends in the ground when you percolate it in the ground before you try to pump it back out for some use. Travel time is the key component to whether this gets categorized as a discharge project or a groundwater replenishment project. the state is generally looking for something north of 2 years of time in the ground for the project to be categorized as just a normal discharge. Anything shorter than that, and they're looking at applying this more stringent set of regulations. So the question would be, well, what is the travel time? It depends on a number of factors, including where are the domestic wells, each and every domestic well in a certain zone downstream, I guess you could say downstream, down gradient, we like to say, of the discharge. And though we do have a general understanding of those, there's been no detailed analysis of where those wells exist and how complete is our understanding of those wells. That's something that staff's prepared to do when you bring this item back and bring back some sense of what it would take. Either, number one, we already have an answer, or what it would take to find the answer to that important question. The other issue is this concept of diluent water. Diluent water is mixing water that you add along with your recycled water to reduce the concentration of some of the contaminants. It's dilution water, I think would be a better term. If this project is categorized as the low-threat sort of discharge project, you don't need any added water to go along with your recycled water. Obviously, in Los Osos, we don't have added water to add necessarily, other than the water that naturally occurs in the creek. If we do categorize this as a groundwater replenishment project, we do have the benefit of water that naturally flows down the creek and is added to the basin. And that can be given as credit for dilution water. And so the report contemplates what the quantities might be and how that would affect the regulation of this water supply. The other key item that you'll see in the report is this issue of credit in the soil for the removal of contaminants. And that's something that's important for this process, that when the water is put in the ground, it might have a certain level of carbon and other things that as it travels through the soil, those things are slowly degraded, and you're given a treatment credit for that degradation. The specifics of that are assumed in the report based on the best available information, but are really only known after testing is completed. There's tracer tests that can happen to define all of these things. So there is additional technical work that has to be done to nail things down. I wanted to bring it back to some of the big ideas for the purpose of this meeting. One of the big ideas is that this does appear to be a viable concept. We were looking for fatal flaws. We were looking for feasibility level issues, things that would kill the project. For instance, if we determined that we would have to run the treatment plant through reverse osmosis or something that generated a highly concentrated stream of salty brine, that would be a fatal flaw in Los Osos because we have no ocean outfall. We have nothing to do that we can do in a cost-effective manner with the brine at this point. Not that it's impossible, but it would be a big barrier for the project if you're looking at brine management. So we do have options in this report that do not require reverse osmosis and do not generate brine. And so those options we believe to be viable and within a range of costs that can be reasonably considered. The other big idea is that the permit constraints that we looked at for this process, things like the resource agencies, Army Corps, Fish and Wildlife, and so forth, did we see any fatal flaws there? And we didn't note any fatal flaws in that process. And that permits in this drought environment may be something that could be obtained more expeditiously than in other environments, I guess I could say. So next steps, if the committee's interested in this concept, would be to look at available well data that we have all around that discharge area, look at the cost of further analysis and understanding to get to a level where you can actually apply for permits and put more finality on the construction cost, and then talk about how this may be considered as a future project in your basin plan set of programs. So that's staff's report. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Do we have any questions? Director?
Yes, if I could. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. a very, really interesting concept, Rob, and I do know it's been talked about for a while. When you say that we have options within the alternatives that you've described here, we have options that will work absent having to do RO. There's only, it looks to me in this setup, there's only one of 5 different options with the 2 different kinds of disposal or discharge that would require RO. Am I reading that right?
Right.
So there's a universe of possibility in there that has it. In terms of the overall operating cost, it sounds to me like next steps is to more fully flesh out what this particular approach would cost. Because as I noted in the alternatives here, monitoring and the full-on operation under whatever permit rules we get is going to be an ongoing operational cost.
Right.
And so I'm happy at this point to express my support for moving forward with this. I think this is an exciting concept that we should get more details on the cost. I think, and we can talk about that a little bit later, is that in terms of alternatives to this, which might include direct potable reuse within our lifetime, as those things develop, I think that's another item that we should be looking at as well.
I think it's interesting to note what's happening in other local communities. City of San Luis Obispo just commissioned a study to look at the same set of issues, including indirect and direct potable reuse. Right. And so the industry is coming up to speed on what this means, what are the technologies, and how can they be used. And so our understanding is growing rapidly right now as compared to the previous decades where there wasn't so much pressure on this as a concept.
Right. I think the timing is excellent to really explore whatever we want to call them advanced reuse options for this. So I think it sounds good.
Great. Any other questions? Yeah, Bill.
I support Supervisor Gibson's sentiments on this, and I think we should move forward, but we really need, as early as possible, to get a better understanding of cost benefits, what this will really mean for the basin.
I agree with that. There are some comparative costs in there per acre foot that appear attractive. The economy of scale is important, and the annual yield of this program, I think, is contemplated here in the memo as to how large of a program you'd have both now and in the future. And so they've tried to bracket those numbers that this is not a 10 you wouldn't do it if you could only get 10 acre feet out of it. Right. But it's north of 100 acre feet, and as time goes on, as additional recycled water becomes available, it may be hundreds of acre feet in size. Plus, it provides some level of additional tools in the management tool bag. Broderson is one. Recycled water reuse in the community is one. It's just another tool with a capital component that's fairly modest. A little more pipeline, creek outfall, a stream gauge, and some monitoring wells if treatment's not required. So it'll be interesting going forward.
Supervisor Gibson.
Thank you. I wonder if I could follow up. That was the one thing I couldn't tease out of the report. It looks like between startup and build out, there may be between 150-ish acre feet a year to 550-ish acre feet a year that could be discharged to the creek. Has the calculation been done under a particular volume of discharge, what the benefit to the basin balance is? I just didn't jump out at it.
Yeah, it's not in this report. It was in a previous study that was our precursor. It depends on the year. It could be as high as 70, 80% in certain years, maybe even as high as 90, depending on where the wells are and how we manage it, and could be as low as 30 to 40% in certain conditions. So there's a wide range, but it's not 5%. It's substantive. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll open it to public comment. Jeff? Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. I just wanted to support the
Hold off, Jeff.
cost analysis of looking at this further. I think it is something we should look at as a tool, to add to managing the basin. You mentioned the next steps. Would that, and looking at the distance of the wells for the travel time, and do we have a more detailed scope of what the next steps would be, or what are we looking at moving forward? What would be our next step moving forward, I guess?
Right. But before we spend time that's above the management budget here that's been approved, we would come back for a scope on that. Okay. I think we're talking about just a number of hours of my time, maybe a few hours of Spencer's time to flesh out the known information that we already have.
And so at the budget right now, have we met that max? Have we met our budget obligation at this point?
For the work product that's in front of you, yes. We were able to do that in budget. I'm talking about the $50,000 management budget that we have that can handle odds and ends as we prepare for future meetings. I think would be sufficient for the next steps.
So right now we're gonna bring this back as an agenda item to address that.
Yeah, we will, and we'll bring it back with some recommendations which we omitted from this administrative draft, wanting to get the technical information out in the public eye first.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, I'm sorry I didn't see you. I was blocked there. Okay, Jeff, we'll go to public comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Edwards, and I'd like to join the Basin Management Committee in support of this concept, at least at this juncture. It looks like it has enormous potential, and I support it not only because it has potential to mitigate for seawater intrusion, but it's actually a project. Unlike the other paper pushing that sometimes is often required but isn't so effective in managing our basin. As everyone may know, the creek bed at the location that's proposed for recharge is the Paso Robles Formation, is Zone D or E that's actually surfacing or daylighting at the creek bottom. So this is the most direct conduit to the very basin or basins that are impacted by seawater intrusion, or the wedge of seawater intrusion. Clearly, there'll be a formal comment period, and I'll be making some written remarks, but I have a couple thoughts and or questions for Rob. It seems like this question of discharge versus reuse and replenishment is a little semantical, and I'm wondering if we can enjoy both worlds in using discharge when it comes to level of permitting and use groundwater recharge when it comes to either expedited permitting and or grant funding or so forth. So I'm wondering if there's a way to use that. My sense of it is that most of the wells are probably shallow. The domestic wells are all shallow. And if this water is actually going to the zones D and E, there's no way that water's ever going to travel hydraulically to those other wells, in my opinion. So I think that may be a way to maintain this as a discharge project. It's my understanding that hydraulic travel time doesn't apply to agricultural wells, and that's a question I have. I don't know that for sure. I'm curious if we're going to be able to, through monitoring, actually measure the benefits of this seasonal release on seawater intrusion. Are we going to actually be able to determine how much it's benefiting? Because ultimately that ties in, I think, to the legal rights question, because we don't want to make commitments of water unless we know that it's going to be long-term benefit, especially if we have to make those long-term commitments. Another thought is that if we're able to add water to that area, which is known as the creek compartment, and we also want to shift some of our wells to the east side, I think adding water to that zone is going to allay some of the concerns that the farmers have about the urbanites coming and taking their water. So if we're actually adding water to that zone, again, I think it'll allay some of the concerns that the farmers have. So I look forward to this project moving forward and the next steps. Thanks.
Thank you.
Lou Tornotsky. It's a historical moment. I agree with everything that Jeff said. I think this is a really interesting opportunity that has lots of potential. I think it could be parsed out in how do we sort of wend our way through the regulatory and legal issues and so on. And then what is the project? And also this thing has potential to interest maybe a creative third-party funder, grants, and something that gets out of the purview of over-careful bureaucrats might want to support this.
Thank you. Could I make one request? Could you guys state your names for the record here?
I was just going to do that. Keith Weimer, local citizen, Sustainability Group, and Sierra Club. I also have supported this in the past and submitted just an analysis that I'd ask you just to take a look at as you're looking at this. And what I pointed out is there is a tremendous benefit to use this as a way to support the wells, just as Jeff was saying. I believe it needs to be a replenishment project because what you want to make sure happens is that the water is getting to the wells that you're going to be pumping and actually supporting those. As Jeff suggested, if we put the water in the creek as a discharge and we don't substantiate that it's getting directly to the wells that you're going to be using, supply wells and so on, then there's a good chance that that water is being lost, and the recycled water is too important for that. Now, as far as replenishment and a higher level of treatment, you talked about RO, but what we continue to stress is why not use rainwater? Why not collect rainwater off the buildings at the treatment site, this building here, and store rainwater. The basin plan didn't encourage that, but we say take another look at it and blend it with that water. So you're using a higher quality water that goes into that creek. But I do want to reemphasize that we need to have those tracer tests and to make sure it's getting there directly, and that you can recapture the water that you put in there, because we do not want to waste recycled water. So on that note of rainwater, what we're also suggesting, and we hope you look at it, and in terms of grants too, as Lou mentioned, why not look at grants, Proposition 1 grants, for overall LID stormwater management plan, where you're collecting rainwater and you're infiltrating rainwater in such a way that it benefits all of your recycled water use. So it not only benefits the groundwater, and dilutes the salts and so on before you bring it out of the ground, but you can use that rainwater to blend with all the recycled water to make a better recycled water program throughout the basin. I mean, if you took water off this roof and you had water going to, let's say the golf course, and you blended those two waters together, the golf course is going to be more likely to use that water, and want to use that water. I think that's it. Thank you.
Karen.
Thank you, Marshall. Karen Venditti, also local resident and Sierra Club member, and most of all, just someone who cares deeply in the long-term picture. Rob, I'm so thrilled to hear that the creek discharge program is being considered as an alternative to discharging at dry farms. When I had understood about the dry farm possibility, I was aghast. It's like, hey, they're already doing the right thing. Let's not mess that up. So at any rate, as it relates to the creek discharge, the way you've described it, my ultimate goal is, I'm sure the same as all of you, that it eventually truly recharges our aquifer and pushes back on seawater intrusion. That may or may not require the highest level of 22. I forget what is it? The treatment level of something 22. I forget what it is. But at any rate, I do trust that you will take a look at the costs both ways. But as you look at costs, I think that all of us agree in the long term, the big picture, that even if it costs a little bit more to treat it a little bit better, that if that accomplishes what we want for our grandchildren and our children's grandchildren, that's what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynette.
Lynette Tornatsky, Los Osos. I'm only bringing this up because I didn't see it in the report, and I've heard about this before. Emerging contaminants. I know that wastewater treatment plants don't take everything out, and I know that as a country we don't particularly look at a lot of the contaminants that Europe does, but this has been brought up before, and I'm hoping, since I think it's such a good idea to do, that you will find some justification to stop those kind of arguments that might be coming up in the future just because they came up before. Thanks.
Any other public comment? Okay, seeing none, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the board for direction to staff.
Mr. Chair, perhaps just a little bit of feedback on public comment?
I would like to make a comment. Supervisor Gibson just informed me he has to leave at 20 after 3, so.
Oh, okay. I'll be very brief. I believe that we can monitor the effectiveness of the program over time using tracer studies and other monitoring techniques. I think a lot of the comments were very helpful, and I've noted those, and we'll think about those prior to the next staff action.
And do you have a time frame when you're expecting to bring this back, or?
Always want to move things fast, so try to make next meeting.
Really? Okay. All right. Do we have direction, or how do we want to proceed here?
I'd like to make a motion that we receive the report, staff presentation, and public comments, and place the item on a future agenda for detailed discussion.
Second. We have a motion and a second. I think you've got some good direction from this as far as the comments. I think everybody was supportive, but again, as you mentioned before, this is on the website, both the CSD's website and the county's website, so if people want to look at it and provide more detailed comments, that is available. So can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Mr. Ohilsky?
Yes.
Mr. Garfinkel?
Yes.
Mr. Zimmer?
Yes.
Okay, so with that then we'll go to general public comment for items not on the agenda. And again, since Supervisor Gibson does have to leave, if you do have a comment, I think it would be more productive if you guys got ready to make them so you could get them in here. Thank you. Lindy?
Lindy Owen, sorry I started off with the wrong public comment, but just to continue, I think that Rob and I have had the conversation about how if outdoor use is 1/3 at least of all water use per household, if there's any way to stop that draw from the basin, it's worth looking at. And I think a very affordable method, long-term again, would be to get people to either reuse their septic tanks, which are 1,200 gallons possibly, but it's going to take imported water from the effluent or from the upper aquifer. Our rainwater, I just emptied all my rainwater in 2 hours. You know, it's 8 barrels, 8 garbage cans full of rainwater. It's gone. Don't have a drop of rainwater until Mother Nature starts up again. We cannot depend on rainwater here because we only have it for a small portion of the year, but we do have, when we're not able to collect rainwater, we do have access to upper aquifer water, which is adequate for yard, and your toilets can be plumbed with it. Not everybody could do that, but if we can take 1/3 of the draw off of our basin by working with storage tanks on site, I have one now that I haven't set up yet, but I need to have an affordable way of water being brought from any of the purple pipelines or from any of the places that we have wells that are extracting upper aquifer water. That is one affordable, pretty easy step, and I think it's long-range future planning for an area that's never going to return, I think, in enough years for us to enjoy, too much water. And lastly, we really need to encourage that our farmers want this water and have a use for it, whether it's improving the quality or slightly reducing the price. I think it's important as anything that they stop drawing from the basin, and anything we can do to get water to them is worth it. I just encourage that those are very affordable ways for us to get forward. And again, what I said earlier, no new growth. I mean, that's idiotic. And so I really hope that we stop playing the game that we will have. I mean, Mr. Gibson suggested by the time the sewer went online, we could open up all development on all the empty lots. And it just can't happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Lindy. Keith?
Keith Weimer, Sustainability Group in Sierra Club and Los Osos homeowner. The bottom line for the Sierra Club and the LOSG is your commitment to a strong conservation program and reuse program. These are two cornerstones of the basin plan, and they are how the basin is balanced and seawater intrusion is reversed long term. They are also essential in the short term to increase the margin of safety between what the model says can be pumped and what will actually be pumped to minimize potential impacts of the Los Osos wastewater project and the pumping changes, not to mention the worst drought in history. We don't think the county has shown a commitment to maximize conservation, or the county would have done it with the grant money. The reason that Supervisor Gibson gave for not having a stronger program is that it is an indoor-only program, and an outdoor program has no nexus. All conservation has a direct nexus to the project and to saving the basin. And the CDP for the project says measures will not be limited to low water use fixtures and gray water systems. Gray water systems are outdoor measures, and the county implementation plan includes indoor-outdoor water surveys that were supposed to include leak detection and a handout for residents on ways to reduce overall water use. But they were never done. Medal's report said the county would assist property owners in repurposing septic systems with incentives and even provide a pilot project. Grant money could easily be redirected to these purposes and to outdoor measures, but it seems to be redirected to construction administration. You say in your response to one of our 16 questions that funding for conservation may be included in future efforts. That's not convincing to us, given the present budget and other efforts. If you're not willing or able to have the county use some of the conservation grant to coordinate efforts with you to maximize them during the hookup, we don't think you've tried hard enough. And we, again, respectfully ask the county to reconsider, to use that $3.8 million that is budgeted, some on surveys and better outreach, some on rebates for recirculators and washers, and some to coordinate an outdoor program with you. That would include rebates and other incentives to repurpose septic systems to simple rainwater tanks, the least expensive option. This has to be done now, and we're missing an opportunity if it isn't. So we again ask that you agendize as an action item a discussion of conservation and how it can be maximized in the near future for the next meeting. Thank you.
Karen, if we have any other speakers, like I said, Supervisor Gibson has to leave, so.
Karen Venditti, a local resident, concerned citizen. A couple of thoughts. I was very touched by Patrick's comment about the immediacy of our need to act as it relates to the septic tanks and their repurposing. If in fact people are already having those estimates done and beginning to plan that work, they need to know what the cost might be, what the possibilities might be for repurposing as opposed to simply collapsing. And Rob, I would personally like to offer my services as a volunteer. I don't do this lightly. But you may have a few of us in the community who are happy to find a way to get the word out to the residents of Los Osos quickly so that they know what their options are, what their options cost, and what the benefits are, more importantly. So that's an invitation for you. The other thing I might mention, too, was the replenishing projects and the monitoring. I had mentioned before the importance of being able to monitor all the wells, the usage, et cetera. And it seems like in the conversations on many different points, it's become clear that mandatory monitoring is critical for our understanding and for our success. Thank you all very, very much for all the work that you're doing.
Richard, do we have anybody after Richard? Okay, seeing none, we'll close with Richard then. Thank you.
Richard Margetson. I want to talk about the 100 to 140 acre feet going to dryland farmers. And just for Rob, how the last agenda item would be expedited if that water were available earlier than later. Right from condition 5A from the Coastal Development Permit, first I want to read a section. Recycled water reuse program. The recycled water reuse program shall ensure that all tertiary treated recycled water is disposed of in locations within the Los Osos groundwater basin that will maximize its ability to meet basin plan objectives, where the highest priority for reuse shall be replacing existing potable water use with recycled water use where feasible and appropriate, including with respect to both urban and agricultural reuse. And then further down in that condition, with a priority for locations where such beneficial reuse will go the furthest towards meeting basin plan goals. We have experts, we have reports that say that water going to dryland farmers has zero impact on seawater intrusion. Zero mitigation factor. Zero is not even close to maximizing anything. The only thing worse than zero is a negative. Here's something for the attorneys representing the purveyors to think about. I don't believe that based on this document that was approved by the Coastal Commission, which has legal authority, I don't believe, and something for you to kick around, that the county had the right to enter into those contracts, with those contracts having no beneficial use to the basin. Zero. That 140 acre feet, if it's that much, is almost 20%, in the 20% category of the recycled water that will be coming from the plant. You're behind the 8 ball right out of the gate. Right out of the gate. And now you're trying to come up with ways that are going to cost the 3 purveyors money to mitigate for those contracts. This is almost in the category of, there's a comparison of it being in the category of it costing you money for the county entering into those contracts with the school districts.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard. Okay, so with that, then we'll close public comment. Supervisor Gibson, you have to leave.
No, I think that sounds like the meeting, doesn't it?
I think before we adjourn, Supervisor, or pardon me, Committee Member Garfinkel, I have one last comment.
Yeah, I should have brought this up earlier, but during our discussions, it did come up several times, and I'd like to request perhaps for our April meeting that we have what our spending versus budget figures start coming out for each of our meetings, so we have a better idea of really where the money's going. And I believe, if I'm right, Rob, that you're going to bill the purveyors quarterly, or was it by monthly?
Brownstein Hyatt will be separating those invoices and sending them out as they receive them. So
they'll be coming as a stream? Somewhere in one of our documents it says we'll do it bi-monthly or quarterly.
I may be wrong on that.
Oh, okay. Regardless, we ought to be able to see what we're spending versus what our budget is, so we can keep tabs on that.
I think that's one of the things Rob and I are going to talk about with them. So when we bring a formal budget back next month, we'll have all that included. But I think that's a good comment. Okay, so with that, then we'll formally adjourn. I don't have the next meeting date in my mind, but Rob probably does.
Always the third.
Well, I know it's the third Wednesday, but
the clerk maybe can help me out here. Yeah.
That's true. It's the same because there's, yes, I don't know. Anyways, third Wednesday of March, we'll see you back here.
Thank you.